The scenarios you're outlining there are I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg for the complexities involved here. How many years do you think it will take, Gerard, before we discover what effects these vaccines have actually had?
Well, it's taken months. I mean, it took for some people, it's unfortunately only taken hours and days to realise they've been ill from the vaccines. I mean, my first red flag was October last year when I had a 30-year-old male contact me who had taken the vaccine in late August on a Friday, and by Tuesday he was in hospital paralysed down his right-hand side. Now, he was a healthy 30-year-old male who had a mortgage and a young child to support. He'd been out of work for over 6 weeks. The only time, and was still in bed by the time he called me. He's went to a wheelchair and he's still got limited movement, but his movement has improved. But no financial support. He's still trying to get compensation from the government.
What, over a year later? That's 14 months.
Absolutely. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, well, as there was an article in one of the media outlets back in September that vilified me, but they've only paid out 47 payments up until that article, which was August, and I'm not sure how many they're up to now, but it's only a handful. And I mean, I've got a database of 8,000 people who've contacted me to say they've been injured, and of that, there's 407 who've both been injured after the first one and lost their jobs because they couldn't get the second jab. So they got both injured and lost their jobs. I mean, some of the cruelty that's going on.
How much of your time is spent dealing with these poor people who've been so badly affected by this?
Well, it's pretty much my full-time job now. I come in the morning, even at the middle of the night, like I get messages on my Facebook page as well, like through the messaging system there. So I would probably get 600 to 800 messages a day. Now, some of that spam, like when I say spam, it's people, sending me links. But there would be, on average, I reckon, 50 to 60 people a day. And it's dropped off, but then it's surged again since last week because I've put those footage of the questions I'm asking and estimates up on Facebook. So that's brought a whole new wave again this week of people contacting.
So the federal government in that budget a couple of weeks ago, the federal government put aside, I think if I remember rightly, $55 million for vaccine adverse reaction payouts. From what you're saying, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right?
That's the tip of the iceberg. It's actually $77 million.
Okay.
And if everyone got $20,000, you could pay out 3,000 people. But, there's people who've been out of work for over a year. They've paid tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills. Their spouses have had to give up work to come home and look after them. I know people have had to sell their houses to basically pay their medical bills and support themselves. And I actually used one of their cases whereby the government refused to pay out compensation despite having 2 immunologists, a haematologist, 2 neurologists. I might have got some of that wrong in terms of what their speciality were, but it was about 7 medical specialists that all said that vaccine had caused this particular lady's injury. And despite that, the TGA still and the health department still refused to acknowledge that was caused by the vaccine. And they used the fact that Pfizer don't recognise it as a side effect. Well, Pfizer only conducted tests on adverse events up to 30 days after the second jab before they released it. And if you look at the 6-month data, adverse events in the vaccine group are much, much more than in the placebo group. And yet that just doesn't even get mentioned. They still say that evidence shows that the vaccine's safer. Well, it's not. So
Gerard, we've only got a minute left, but in short, what should the government do now? There's obviously a lot of people suffering, and we probably haven't seen the end of it yet. What should the government do?
Well, the government's got to stop companies from issuing mandates. I mean, the mandates have to be lifted point blank across the country, and quite frankly, I think the vaccine rollout needs to stop. We've had over 10 million cases of COVID in Australia this year. That's recorded. So, I mean, I had COVID, as did my wife, but we didn't ring up the government and tell them that we had COVID. I mean, it's none of their business, right? We did stay at home and isolate, but you know what I mean? It's like, since when did you have to ring the government and tell them you're sick? So there'd be millions of others that probably caught COVID and didn't log it either. So clearly it never stopped transmission and didn't stop people from getting it, number one. there has been a COVID deaths this year, but there's been many more non-COVID deaths in the last 2 years. So it's very questionable as to whether or not it's even effective. I personally don't think it is. And so, step 3 is to go about compensating and helping those people that have either been injured by the vaccine and letting those people that have suffered as a result of the mandates, let them go back to work.